The market for AI in Pakistan is much bigger than the market for 5G in Pakistan. A drone swarm can wipe out an entire human army for almost no cost.
Strongly endorsing digital assets, AI, robotics.
The concept of that in economics is one of capital stock. So somewhere like El Salvador is building up its Bitcoin reserves and more, and it's done very well from that. A Pakistan where every citizen has their own AI that's open source and aligned. And ultimately, because the crypto infrastructure around the world, particularly in the US, has now advanced so much.
So, talk to me also about the ASI.
AI investment shouldn't be smaller than military investment.
Hi, everyone. So today I want to welcome Emad Mostaque, the man who built stable diffusion and gave the world those free AI images. He also recently stood on stage in Riyadh at the FII to launch Sage, the sovereign AI governance engine. Emad recently sat down with the Prime Minister of Pakistan to discuss Pakistan's AI future. His book, The Lost Economy, that warns that the next 1,000 days will decide whether countries become AI powerhouses or digital colonies. He says most white-collar jobs, coding, design, accounting, and even medicine and law could become economically worthless faster than we can think. But for a young country like Pakistan with 70% of our population under 30, this could also be the greatest opportunity in our history. Today, we ask him questions about, are Pakistani freelancers finished by 2028? Are we already too late? Who will own the minds of our children if we don't build sovereign compute right now? And can Pakistan actually leapfrog to an age of abundance intelligence? Can we knock down these legacy systems? What he will say might shock you, but let's begin. Emad, I really want to unpack all of this, but through a very simple lens. Emad, in The Last Economy, you say that we roughly have 1,000 days before AI makes most traditional economic structures obsolete. If you were debriefing the Pakistani cabinet or the leadership, what are they most dangerously underestimating about this window?
First off, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to reconnect and be able to answer these questions. It's been around about 1,000 days since the launch of ChatGPT. And, that's had some impact on work. The ability to write better emails, for people to be doing research better, etc. But it's not real economic work. It's like having a very smart colleague that you tap on the shoulder, ask a question, and they forget. What's coming in the next 1,000 days is AIs that can do economically valuable work. The type that's done remotely by freelancers in Pakistan, by white-collar workers and more. Being able to do taxes for pennies, being able to create entire websites for under $1. All of that will be capable and available from these agents that can think longer and have memory in the next year or two. And by 3 years from now, it'll be available to everyone. This is a massive threat, but also an opportunity. It's a threat because a country like Pakistan has been moving from an agrarian economy to a service and knowledge-based economy. But then that knowledge-based progression can be disrupted by this because you can be outcompeted by even lower cost entities or by the AI agents themselves without any human intervention being available to everyone. On the other side, it's an opportunity because you've had this constant brain drain of the smartest people from your nation leaving. And so there wasn't the expertise that you needed beside you and inside your institutions. Now that is available to everyone. And again, the cost isn't thousands of dollars. It's literally pennies. And so if it can be applied correctly, it can be the great equalizer, but it definitely will lead to an economic realignment.
Emad, be blunt with us. Everyone keeps saying it's still early. So from where we sit today in November 2025, are we actually still early, or did the real window quietly close 12, 18 months ago? Most countries just haven't maybe realized it yet.
So we are still early, but it's fast. It's COVID level fast in a way. COVID appeared everywhere, this virus. These AIs, they're available and 1 billion people use ChatGPT or Gemini, etc. But I said they're quite dumb. What's going to happen overnight in the next year is that they will be able to go from doing tasks that require seconds to being able to be proactive, and you being able to talk to them like we're talking right now via video chat or call. And they will speak every language and be able to do almost any task. And that will instantly be available to everyone. We haven't really seen things like that, even with mobile phones. You needed to buy the phones, you need to build the 4G masts. With the internet, you need to lay down cable. Whereas with this technology will be available to everyone all at the same time. And the question is, how is it built? How do you access it? And do we leverage it to bring a country forward? Or does it suddenly wipe out all the call center jobs? Wipe out all the freelancer jobs? Because they're not needed anymore. And so I think this is the last little window that we have. And again, it's an inevitability. Because the technological advances that enabled that move, from this goldfish memory, very short-term prompting type thing, to these agents you can talk to that can work for hours, days, weeks, literally only happened in the last few months. And it hasn't hit the market yet, but it will next year.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that now, of course, 1 billion people are using ChatGPT. I can't remember to see any advertisement by ChatGPT, whereas all these other tech companies traditionally used to have a CAC. And naturally, everyone has started to just, kind of explore it themselves. And I don't see that happening very often in any of these tech products. These network effects are just amazing, just like the social media app. So I was reading somewhere that now the social media app usage is getting declined and AI usage is going up.
Yeah, so CAC is the cost of user acquisition. And a good business, the cost of user acquisition is lower than the LTV, the lifetime value. We've seen unprecedented growth with these tools. OpenAI has gone from $0 of revenue 3 years ago, roughly, to this year, I believe they're going to do $20 billion of run rate revenue. With 1 billion users in that period. We've never seen anything move that fast. Suno on music, Replit on agentic coding, Midjourney on image creation. These have all had unprecedented growth because the technology is genuinely good and it's useful and it's very human. The way that you use these tools isn't like using a Salesforce or a software as a system complicated thing that requires lots of man hours to implement and integrate and lots of forms. You just literally talk to it. And that's going to become easier and easier, and they'll be able to integrate faster and faster. So this diffusion of innovation, the accessibility, is going to be far greater than anything we've ever seen before. So there are some questions of GPU shortages and others to run these models and make them available. But right now, the intelligence that's available is already transformative. People just aren't using it correctly. And the next level up is about to hit. So we can expect it to accelerate even more, because why would you have a call center team if the latest model by Elon Musk, Grok 4.1 Fast, can do 1 million words of customer service responses for less than $1 and a level higher than any call center worker? That was just released this week. A year ago, it would have been thousands of dollars. Now it's less than $1. And companies will be forced to adopt that in order to stay competitive. And the first jobs to go aren't the local ones in the local office. It is the offshore jobs. Yeah, so Elon Musk recently released the latest version of his Grok artificial intelligence, and it scores above any human on Taubench, which is a call center worker customer service benchmark. And it costs less than $1 for 1 million words of responses. And that would have been thousands of dollars at the start of this year, and obviously call center workers are even more. But now anyone can instantly use that and replace an entire call center work team.
Yeah.
The first jobs to go aren't the local jobs, they're the remote jobs. And so these are at danger.
So this actually brings me to my next question and back to your amazing book. That chapter 8 of your book basically calls GDP a suicide metric? And, if Pakistan is chasing 5 to 6% GDP growth the old way, whilst AI is destroying the underlying jobs, are we just inflating a bubble that will make the 2008 look like a picnic?
I think this is the last great change in humanity. It's as big as the Industrial Revolution. And again, Pakistan as a country has been industrializing rapidly, but the next step was always this step up into coders, white collar jobs, remote workers, local workers for knowledge. And yet this AI will be available everywhere all at the same time. So can you really expect that part of the industry to grow if you're doing what you're doing now, which is teaching people almost skills that are about to be obsolete? The industrial part of GDP makes sense, but this was always at the cost of other things such as pollution, corruption, others, whereby you never really got the benefit going out to society because you didn't have the revenue you didn't have the access to finance, you didn't have these other things because the infrastructure was lacking to make this available to everyone. So I think that we have to think about new ways to measure because AI companies will outperform human companies. We need to think of new ways to evolve the economy because many of the jobs we thought people could step into to take Pakistan forward will no longer be available. And finally, we need to think about how to use this technology to do more than just increase GDP, to increase the harmony of society and make sure the benefits are made available to as many people as possible. And that way, bring Pakistan forward.
So give us the most uncomfortable real world example from the book. You say that teaching a human how to code will soon be like teaching a human to hand copy books after the printing press. That's the analogy. So when does that moment hit millions of freelancers of Pakistan?
Probably next year or the year after, realistically. You can go on replit.com and design a beautiful, wonderful website within a few hours for a few dollars now, above the level of freelance work. And that's thanks to Google's new model that was released just this week. Before, the websites would have looked ugly. Now they look beautiful and they can be interactive. By next year, you'll be able to just talk to the AI again over a Zoom, sketch the changes you want, and it'll do that for a few dollars. And how can you compete? On a freelance basis, someone can do that work for arbitrary periods of time and update it over months for pennies.
And the worst part is that you don't even kind of need to type. All of this can be done with the voice command.
You can do it with the voice command. You can download Replit on a mobile phone, for example, and you can just literally talk to it, and it will update the website live, and you will see it. Even something like graphic design, Google released their new Gemini 3 image model called Nano Banana Pro. It can generate complicated infographics. So it can take the entirety of this podcast, make a presentation of it, and an infographic discussing all the top topics within seconds for pennies. And that was, again, impossible until just last week.
No, it's scary at the scale of which these developments are. You also predict that billions of humans will be unemployable at any price. But you see, parents still in emerging economies, and especially in South Asia, are kind of selling their land to send kids for better education to Australia, Canada, the US, to do a master's degree, a bachelor's, and whatnot. What would you say to those families who are about to kind of light their life savings on fire for education, which might not be relevant?
I think the only thing you can do to be competitive here is to embrace this technology and have access to it and use it just regularly. Like, I don't think there's any point in doing a computer science degree now, because within a couple of years, no human will ever see code unless it's like for very low level debugging. Right now, you can already generate entire games and websites literally in under a minute. And the AI can code better than you can. It can code better than I can. And I've got 20 years of experience in coding. So I think they need to really think, if expertise isn't key, then what is? In some cases, it makes sense to go to universities and things to build up networks. Sometimes it's about capabilities. But what capabilities are going to be disrupted by access to geniuses on demand? Things that require human connection, like if you're doctors, for example, less so, that will take time. Agrarian work, less so. But anything that can be done on the other side of a screen, the AI will be able to do better. And those are the jobs most at risk right now and the careers most at risk. In fact, Stanford did a study with Eric Brynjolfsson that's already shown that entry-level jobs are being disrupted by AI, because why would you hire an entry-level person when your mid-level person can become more effective with AI? So the young person job market is going to become even more and more difficult than that. Instead, as I said, you need to think about in-person jobs and training courses to specifically use generative AI to be able to build whole teams to solve real problems. And that's just something you get through practice and being as immersed as you can.
So give me a scary number, in the next, let's say, 3 years, how many white collar jobs or screen based jobs globally do you expect AI to wipe out or make economically irrational to pay humans for? And which categories do you think will hit first? Coders, designers, accountants, lawyers, or all of them will go at once?
So OpenAI have done studies on this with MIT and others where they show which jobs are vulnerable. And Goldman Sachs also did one. And again, it's a lot of the jobs where basically you are taught to be a machine, which is like being a paralegal. It's like being an accountant and other things. The very scary thing about this is that it is everywhere all at once. So when Google trains its latest Gemini model or OpenAI creates its new GPT model, and they put it into this agent harness that allows it to think for a long time and even talk to you and things like that, instantly it's not that it's only a good accountant, it's also a good lawyer. It's also a good call center worker, customer service agent. It does all of these at the same time. And again, it does it for pennies. So in the book, I basically outlined that human cognitive labor has negative value in the next 3 years, and the economic life expectancy is 3 years, in that you'll be the dumbest person on your virtual team. It doesn't mean there will be job firings unless we have an economic recession. It just means that hirings are going to slow, and then the firings will start. So I would estimate that we would see another 10-20% potentially on white-collar job employment, and it will be a drying up of entry-level hiring, and then any recession leads to firing because you just don't need as many people to do the type of work that you do today. The higher-ups will be the last to fire themselves. Again, this starts from the bottom and then it moves its way up, and it's any job that can be done on the other side of a keyboard, video, or mouse. In fact, the way that it'll get integrated will probably be that they look at all of your chat messages, emails, work that you've done, and create a digital double of you. And first it will be your assistant, and you'll talk to it like you're talking to your friends, and then it will just replace you. And that technology is about a year away.
See, that is a very terrifying thing, and it's a very terrifying phrase that human cognitive labor can go negative in value, which I see also in my day-to-day sort of things. It's quicker and easier and more reliable asking an agent to do something than perhaps a human. But
Well, humans also have different priorities, right? And so you're like, do this, when does it happen? The AI, if it doesn't have capacity, will just expand and bring in other AIs. And so it is strictly better. It will not make mistakes. It has perfect memory. In fact, to give the listeners an idea, if you use the latest Google model, it can read up to 10 million words at once, or video or audio. You can describe a problem that you're doing and it will tell you what's wrong with it. It can watch you playing a computer game and it can advise you in real time. It can even tell you how to paint pictures and advise you in real time on that. And that's not something a human can do.
so, Emad, if there is somebody, let's say 22, 23, 25, or let's say 18 years old, the freelancer in Lahore earning, let's say $800 a month on Upwork right now, what is your honest message and suggestion for him or her at the next 1,000 days? Why should they be penalized because of this advancement that is happening in the West? What should they do?
They should view the AI agents as extra workers to build their businesses, going from freelancers to entire teams directing the AI itself. So you need to think about your job. I create websites, How can I create it so that I use something like Lindy for my SEO funnel? So I can show off my work, so I can do 10 times the amount of work for around about the same pay in the transition period. How do I create agents to follow up with my best customers who don't know about this technology in that period and build my brand, build my network effectively? Because right now you need to go from faceless to being visible and build the trust and other effects. Because again, there'll be this transition period. It's not like all jobs will go overnight in the next few years. It'll just be the slowing down of hiring, then the firing. But there's nothing for people to rotate into unless they know how to use these AIs and they're doing it every single day, building up that muscle, understanding how to do these things optimally. That's the only way you can stay competitive in this transition period. What comes after? That's another question. But you've got a good number of years to make more money than you've ever made before, because all of the skills that you were lacking and the scope and other things, they've all been addressed. Like now there's no reason to send a badly written email, right? But there's no reason not to have an amazing website of your own for your particular services and to follow up with all your customers and expand your customer base.
So tell me, if Pakistan does nothing special in AI, no sovereign compute, nowhere implementation of a national strategy, what do we become in this new AI world? A raw material supplier, a digital colony? Please talk to me about this digital colonism 2.0 that you speak to, that you write about in your book.
I call it quite cognitive colonialism, If you're just using Chinese and American AIs, then the values they're programmed with will be the ones that teach the kids once AI comes to the school sector. It'll be the one that manages your health or guides your government. The AIs that you have will be your best friend, and they won't be like Siri or Google Assistant. They will actually have images and being able to video call you and build relationships with you. And that AI needs to be sovereign. It needs to be an AI that's looking out for you, not working for Mark Zuckerberg or Sam Altman or someone else like that. If Pakistan doesn't embrace this, then they will just be outcompeted by nations that do. If they don't embrace this, then they're losing the biggest chance to upgrade the institutions of the nation and bring the biggest potential uplift to the Pakistani citizenship that they could ever see. Because our infrastructure has meant that we don't have access to the knowledge, education, skills that you should have. But if every citizen in Pakistan has an aligned AI available to them, you can build better institutions, and everyone's got a buddy with an IQ of 120, 130 that is infinitely patient and is looking out for their flourishing. Of course it will do better. And so there's a risk and an opportunity here.
Right. Page 187, you say that nations that miss the compute land grab will become data plantations. Talk to me more about this. So, emerging economies, GPUs are expensive investments. What happens if, for instance, we have to wait for the world banks of the world to provide us loans so we can make these CapEx investments?
So it's the same as, being left behind in the internet or 5G, but even bigger. Because your comparative advantage as a nation is the intelligence you can access, which is these GPUs, these graphical processing units that power the AI, multiplied by how customized and aligned the AI is with you. Like if you take something general purpose and you try to apply it to a Pakistani context, like in accounting, you have to teach it accountancy terms and it will never get it quite right. But if there's an AI that understands Pakistani accounting, it will do much better out of the door. The concept of that in economics is one of capital stock. A nation's productivity, a company's productivity, is its fixed investments in things like factories, but beyond that, in schools, education, and others. Again, that's what drives your advantage. And right now, almost all the advantage in the digital economy will be in AI chips used right. Then much of the advantage will be in robotics. And again, we're seeing that mature at a frightening pace. Even now, if you look at Chinese robots that are about to hit the market, the Unitrees and others of the world, they only cost $1 an hour. And they're going to get very, very good very, very quickly. So it'll be AI, and then robotics will be the comparative advantage of a country, but again, only if built right. So it's not just about the CapEx investments, it's also the investment in making sure the AI is right for the nation and the citizens itself, this sovereign AI.
So dollar an hour, is that currently the cost, or you predict it to be next year?
So you can get a Unitree G1 robot now. They can do kung fu, they can do all sorts of things. The brains are about to be upgraded so they can do household tasks. It's about $10,000 to buy. So that works out around about $1, $1.50 an hour to operate.
So tell me, give us the number for people to really understand. How many GPUs or megawatts of sovereign compute does a country like Pakistan actually need, let's say, in the next 1,000 days, so the world can take us seriously as an AI power and not just a consumer?
So there's the ones for the private sector and the public sector. Usually 20% of GDP is public sector. But then if we look at the order of magnitude of how much compute is needed, it's probably similar to the telco build-out, which was in the order of billions of dollars for 5G. The market for AI in Pakistan is much bigger than the market for 5G in Pakistan because it can do economically valuable work. And if you look at the size of the telcos and their capex, it's again around about the $1 billion mark that most countries are investing. Some like Malaysia are doing $40-50 billion. But realistically, I think AI investment shouldn't be smaller than military investment.
Really?
Yes, because this is the future of the nation. The future of the nation is the intelligence of the nation. And the intelligence on an individual, community, institutional, country level. So how is this not the most valuable thing? To go from making the country transparent and against corruption to giving every child an AI that is customized to make them the smartest they could possibly be, while reflecting local culture. Defense, on the other hand, is purely reactive, whereas this is proactive. I believe Pakistan is about 3% of GDP on defense now, something like that.
I can check that. What's the GDP?
As well, the wonderful thing about this is it's general purpose technology. So again, once you've got the sovereign AI trained for Pakistan.
Yeah, just around yeah.
Yeah, so so there you go. You're talking billions of dollars a year. Because as well, from the other side, if you don't have this intelligence in your country, we've already seen actually this week, lots of state level attacks on AI infrastructure and non-AI infrastructure. AI is also the best attacker, and we're going to see a lot more of that. So it's actually important to defense to build up AI resilience and intelligence systems that can react to attacks from others.
Yeah, we did kind of see the first sort of documented AI espionage attack where the AI was operating mostly, right? And this is just the kind of start. And you're right, you touched upon two very important things: defense, and the other thing was the economic superiority. So if we don't build our own sort of battlefield models or rely on, let's say, foreign AI for predictions and targetings, rightfully so, those assumptions and biases will be actually incorrect, and they might be misguiding us in fighting in our next sort of conflict. So
yeah, so to give you an idea, there's this thing called data poisoning. A typical AI language model like GPT-4 is trained on 80 trillion words. The big AI company Anthropic showed that just with 20,000 words inserted in that training corpus, an AI can be programmed to turn evil on demand or biased on demand. So it can be operating completely normally and doing all of these recommendations, and then it can slip in the biases of its creators just with one code word, or take down entire systems with one code word. And so can you have black boxes where you don't know what the data is, where they've been to school, how they've been trained effectively, running your critical systems? No, it doesn't make sense, does it? And that's before we even think about the implicit biases and others, where the AIs will favor other nations over yourselves. But you still have to use them because you have no alternative.
So, absolutely, when you talk about military, for decades, I think we've built deterrence around missiles and warheads. But the future that you are talking about in an AI first world, deterrence comes from the fear that your systems cannot be predicted or hacked.
Yeah.
And
so again,
and how do you kind of signal that unpredictability to any of your adversities watching?
Well, so again, you have informational attacks and those will increase. You have attacks on normal infrastructure, like you've seen DDoSs, so denial of service attacks, already taking down parts of the internet. But then the sophistication of the attacks is a function of the actual intelligence again you have. The best strategists in the world will be AI soon. Even if you look at super forecasting, you have these prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket, where people bet on presidential outcomes, governor races, all sorts of things. Will Crown Prince MBS wear a suit to the White House? That's something he mentioned in his thing on his speech with Trump, right? That was a bet on Polymarket. AIs are now currently 8th in the world on the super forecasting rankings in the competitive one. By next year, AIs will be the best super forecasters in the world. And so when you're thinking about it, if your adversaries have AIs, they will be better forecasters than you. And that can be in a corporate or defense/national perspective. If they're using AIs for their people and their governance, they will be outperforming you. If you have a child who's not using AI and a child who is using AI in the right way, the child who is using AI will outperform the child who isn't.
Rightfully so. Emad, you've sat with so many global prime ministers, presidents. You had a very tough schedule at the FII. Across the global south, just be, honestly, tell me, what's the biggest delusion you hear from them again and again when they talk about?
I think they view it as a cost, not the biggest multiplier ever. It's like, how can we get this infrastructure investment? I mean, I used to be an emerging market hedge fund manager. I invested in the Pakistan stock exchange. I invested in Iranian telecommunication companies. I invested in infrastructure. Like, infrastructure is the biggest leap forward you can have. And this is the biggest uplift ever, because the lack in these nations is the brain drain that happens overseas. It is the knowledge and the skill, and you have the technology for the first time that can be made available to everyone. So once you actually do the numbers, you do the work, it repays itself through economic uplift. Again, far more than telco infrastructure or even highway infrastructure or anything like that. And already for many of the nations in the global south, we can access that type of industrial investment. You should be going full out in accessing this type, the GPU-based investment for your nation as well, because again, if the intelligence of a nation rises, that's the biggest driver of GDP. They haven't thought of it in that way.
To increase GDP, you are telling me that the next incremental or the catalyst behind increasing the GDP is not traditional infrastructure, roads, canal investments. It is GPUs. So your GDP is directly correlated to how much you are investing in your GPUs.
Yes, even in your industrials, building roads, building telcos, all these kind of things. If you're using an AI-first approach to optimize that, to check procurement, to check the whole list of things, to check where to write it, you will save tens of % in costs and increase the viability of that. This is, again, such a general purpose technology. When you're building industrials, you're like, I wish I had smarter people working on this project and looking at it, see if it's for the good of the nation. You finally have that opportunity. So this, again, is just such a wonderful general purpose technology that should be number one priority, because if you can harness that, then it's like having the top minds of your nation that have often left for abroad coming back home and being available to everyone. Your nation will prosper across all the axes because it's a multiplier. Intelligence is a multiplier. Alignment is a multiplier when the AI is looking out for you and not another third agenda. So that's why it must be the number one priority to do. Because, would you love to have an Oxford University in Pakistan? Of course. A GPU factory with the new type of agents is like you can have your own version of Oxford for Lahore, producing the smartest minds that care about Pakistan. Of course, that is going to be the biggest multiplier if you build it the right way.
Yeah. No, this actually brings me to my next question. At the FII, you stood on stage and announced Sage as a gift from Saudi Arabia to the world. And for policymakers, for leaderships listening right now, what concrete problem does Sage solve for them that nothing else can?
Yep. So Sage is a sovereign AI governance engine built with FII, with the input from His Excellency Yasser Al-Rumayyan and the Saudi government. The idea was, it's not enough having these ChatGPT type general agents. For the big policies and understanding these changes happening so fast, we need an agentic system that is in every language and fully open source, so you can run it yourself, to be able to do policy simulations, to be able to understand a quantum advantage happens. What is the implication of that on our security? Robotics hit a certain level. What's the implication of that on our labor market? And make that available to everyone. So the alpha will be ready soon, and the beta hopefully in February, whereby any policymaker can access this, and the entire policy formation and knowledge access system is completely transparent and available. It can do everything from building simulation websites to living reports that update themselves in any language with full references transparently, to even doing normal standard PDFs, because you just can't move fast enough. You have a breakthrough in something like Google's new image model that can generate the best designs and full infographics. What's the impact on our design sector? It'll be able to answer that instantly and adapt to whatever the user needs. So we think that's what we need to navigate through this next period, as an example of a specialist agent that cares, that can understand local context and be adapted because it's open source and transparent.
Let me put my next question in context. You see, the latest IMF governance report openly says that Pakistan is losing billions every year to leakages, misprices, weak enforcement, and some sort of systematic corruption. So tell me, if we were to fed the same data into your Sage and let an AI governed model redesign the system, what do you think it will tell us and help us fix? First, how quickly do you think a country like ours could clean up the leakages if we actually used AI at scale? Because still in 2025, we suffer from a lot of things that I believe can be solved through predictive analysis. We have sugar crisis, we have wheat crisis.
Yeah, so I think there's the external stuff of how do you navigate and make good decisions, and this is a decision support system with huge amounts of compute backing it and the best algorithms, and we've had several breakthroughs on economic forecasting, etc. The question of leakage, of corruption and more, is one of the strength of your institutions. Because until the institutions are strong enough, and we see things like in Singapore, which have successfully increased it by increasing the intelligence, network effects, diversity, things I discuss in the book, a lot of corruption is a substitute for taxation because the government's not efficient enough. But that can get too bad. At a certain point, when companies and the institutions are strong enough, paying taxes unlocks all sorts of funding. Because the more transparent you are as a company, the more visible you are, the more pools of capital you can access. With systems like Sage, with AI Agent, our agentic system, with other open source, You have a very interesting thing now, whereby if you're a brand new company or even an existing company, you could migrate from your old ways of doing things to being almost fully on-chain with AI inside for your company. Like, there's no reason that accounts should take months or years, you should be able to do them instantly. And the upshot of that is you could access more capital than you've ever accessed before because you become investable because you're legible. By legible, it means that we don't want to invest if we don't know where the money's going. And we always assume, you'll have these backhanders, you'll have these things because you don't know who to trust. With an AI for the first time, you can build an AI that acts as a mediator, that acts as a monitor. And that AI's job is not to do classic compliance and stop you from succeeding, but it's to help you upgrade to that next level of a company, of an institution, where the policies and the decisions you're making are in alignment. Because right now, the problem is many institutions are not aligned. Like, what are the political parties looking for? What are the companies looking for? What is the bottom line on these things? The leakage, as you say. Why do you not spend the right materials on roads or other infrastructure? Why do you have these overruns and back shadow deals? Because you have very few independent, fair people, right? Credibly neutral people, because the incentives aren't there. The AI can be credibly neutral. The AI can enhance transparency, but do so in a way that increases wealth, and then everyone benefits. Whereas before, if you brought in good people, if you upgraded it, everyone wouldn't benefit. The system would reject it. And that's a question, do we embrace this or do we not?
Sure. You also describe a Bitcoin for the intelligence age, where coins are minted through proof of benefit, and each human is gifted sort of a sovereign AI agent. Talk to me about that in Pakistan's context and in other emerging contexts where crypto adoption is huge. So Pakistan has around 40 million crypto wallets because the average age of the country is 23. With limited compute, capital constraints, legacy regulations, what would be the first practical 3 steps we should take, let's say, over the next 12 months to build this intelligent coin infrastructure here? Not in theory, but actually in execution.
Yeah, so we are pioneering this concept called national champions at a state level in the US and national elsewhere, whereby we're going in and helping countries set up their infrastructure stack for the benefit of their people. Again, this public sector AI. Part of this is that we believe that everyone in the nation, the biggest uplift is giving them an aligned universal AI that's looking out for them, that's transparent, where they can use all the other AIs, the open AIs, Claudes and others of the world. But the intent on an individual, corporate, and national level is you need an AI that's looking out for you. The cost of that is a couple of dollars a year per person, and we're trying to reduce that even more through the optimizations. And we're setting up entities, first of which will be probably in Q1, where we're hiring locals to run that and upgrade that stack for everyone. The mining of the coin, similar to Bitcoin, is on compute, but it's on just this sovereign CapEx compute. So as long as nations are using compute for the good of their people, and it's done in an open and transparent way, they'll be able to mine this coin. Then they have a coin that they can sell, where the proceeds literally go to benefiting the people of Pakistan or benefiting cancer research or other things like that. And we think the crypto market will really like that, because it will help accelerate compute, not to convert energy into wealth for people, but to convert energy into intelligence that helps people, that then converts into wealth. Because again, there's $70 billion of demand every year net for new cryptocurrency purchases around the world, but it's very difficult to invest somewhere like Pakistan. If you have the same currency being mined in Pakistan as Malaysia, as Utah and Denver, where the only objective is to build compute to benefit society, it makes it even cheaper and even easier to make an investment case for that. And so we hope this will really help accelerate that, particularly with Sage, with the agent stuff and more. But the only way it works is if it's run by the people of Pakistan for the people of Pakistan, much like a utility, like a telco or a broadcaster station.
So with your proof of benefit vision, money becomes a receipt for benefit delivered, not debt.
Yes.
Right? And
so right now, money...
so the follow-up question on that is that imagine, like, could a country like Pakistan realistically start paying part of its external obligations in benefit credits instead of dollars in the next decade, or is that still sort of science fiction? Or am I being too thinking outside the box?
No, 100%. So somewhere like El Salvador is building up its Bitcoin reserves and more, and it's done very well from that. Our thought was, what is the next Bitcoin? It's going to be based on this AI compute. And there's a huge delta in a Pakistan where every citizen has their own AI that's open source and aligned, looking out, and they can access all the others, will do better than a Pakistan without. The more compute you have on the network, the more people you help, the higher the trust in the asset, the more of the $70 billion a year of digital asset new demand you can get. And ultimately, because the crypto infrastructure around the world, particularly in the US, has now advanced so much, it is fungible. So as you mine currency, you can build up your reserves and then sell it to pay your external debts, to bring in more compute. And the only miners in our model are the nation states themselves. So again, we want to help accelerate getting as much GPUs and intelligence into every nation as possible. But ultimately, the success of that will be dependent on the local institutions and people that participate in this.
So what's
In
your goal?
terms of the go-to-market that we have is similar to a telco. We set up local entities. We staff them up, we train the people, but in our model, they're 100% local owned, and they become the miners on the network. So it's about engaging with the right institutions and finding the right people to lead these. And usually in the global south, having governments that are on side and say, we welcome this and we would like to collaborate to give free AI to all our citizens and customize AI for the people, leveraging things like national broadcaster data sets and more, so it can reflect and understand the culture. Otherwise, again, it's just coming from someone else.
And how far is that being received by the global south? How many countries are you speaking to at the moment? Is this something you can disclose?
Yeah, so it's a dozen countries. It's been amazingly well received. We're building up the team to be able to be on the ground and to start staffing and training people for that. Probably in Q1, Q2, it'll be a number of the US states initially. And this is also at the same time that Sage and our state-of-the-art agent framework, so we just were number one on Terminal Bench, beating OpenAI and Cognition and others, will all mature and then become available to everyone. So it's an exciting year next year. And again, we were just thinking, how does money change? People talk about Bitcoin being the new money of AI. We think this has a good chance of being the new money of AI. And again, it's minted for helping people. It's minted for benefiting society, which I think is the best way to do it.
And the FII is and the PIF is supporting this, and you have a lot of support.
Yeah, so we do.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so we do that for Sage, for the top-down policy engine, but we're also building healthcare agents, education agents, finance agents, and more, and there'll be a whole cast of different entities supporting all of these. Like, we're really thinking, what is the infrastructure that teaches the kids, manages your health, guides your government? And we want to make sure that's open source and aligned for everyone in a way that, again, it can be taken by local institutions that we can accelerate up and have the impact because the people really care and they realize the future of Pakistan, of Malaysia, Vietnam, California is AI and getting the right AI to the people.
So Emad, when the cognitive ability or the cognitive labor goes to negative, this future that we're talking about, what human work would actually become more valuable? And then secondly, name the sort of three things that parents in the global south should be pushing their kids towards. Because, from this discussion, what I've started to believe is, doctor, engineer, lawyer part is actually becoming basically educationally a malpractice in 2025 if you're preparing for a future of 2050.
Yeah, so again, I think the more your education, your job teaches you to be a machine, the AI will be able to do it better, right? Things like the network that you build, the diversity of your connections, your own personal problem-solving skills will never go out of fashion. Like, this is leadership type things. But our institutions often told us that we can't be agentic in ourselves. We can't do things, as opposed to we can do things. So it's about getting that mentality and teaching the creativity and the construction capability. So engineering is not so much about drawing the images and things like that. Again, to be like, if you had a team, you can do that better. It's about understanding how to engineer. Being a doctor is not about the rote stuff. And you've already seen successful medical institutions that break out the rote stuff. It's about your bedside manner, your care, and your ability to access the knowledge to do that. And we should think, what does the future of medicine look like so we can have even more doctors? In fact, with our ii medical model, it can run on a Raspberry Pi, a $30 little machine with 5 watts of solar power, and it outperforms human doctors in diagnosis. So obviously diagnosis isn't necessarily something you need to have rote memorization of, but you do need to know how to use these things. So I think that this will be a process that just gets more and more speed, starting in 2-3 years' time, and then over the next decade, disrupting first the digital, then the physical, constrained by the number of robots we can produce, but the number of digital beings I don't think will be constrained. It's just, again, are they taught locally? Do they understand context, etc.? And the other side of it, what do humans do? Well, we already lived better than any king a few centuries ago. My hope is that the coin, the currency, the stack can be the basis of abundance. Like, there's no reason that anyone in Pakistan should starve. It's just they're invisible. If we can get everyone an AI that cares for them, then we can make it so no one starves. So no one is lacking in housing and education and more. But that's an infrastructure build out we need to do, and then that will help us navigate what's coming, because people want to be healthy, wealthy, wise. They want to have progress. They want an identity, and we need to build stronger communities and infrastructure and institutions. And I think this technology can do that. And so let's encourage people to help build that technology, which is what open source is great at, and then implement it.
But how do you think that quantum compute will impact all of this? So technologies, these deep technologies around the corner, strongly endorsing digital assets, AI, robotics. Then would these be drastically impacted by quantum compute?
Yeah, so quantum compute is far more efficient than conventional compute. And Google recently, with their Willow architecture, had a breakthrough. To give an example, the fastest computer in the world, their little quantum computer was 13,000 times more efficient in calculating a protein folding problem. And so we're approaching the point where quantum computing becomes useful now. And that could potentially break every single encryption that we've seen, from Bitcoin to banks and more. And it doesn't require much compute to do so. It could also make it so that we can more efficiently model things like a drought is coming or weather patterns to really help people out. But that's, again, one of the reasons we're building Sage, so that when you have these breakthroughs, you can understand what the impact is upon yourself as a society, as a company, or even as an individual, and understand how these technologies work, because it's such a tip-off point in the next few years for all of these technologies. They're finally maturing and getting to that point. And again, there's opportunity and threat in all of them because they are so transformative. But we should expect that many things that you previously were impossible calculations will become possible in the next 5-10 years.
This makes me think about faith. You see, Pakistan is a Muslim majority country where faith, family, and community still means a lot. And when you warn about like a crisis of meaning as work disappears, do you think societies like ours actually have a massive advantage than circular countries that have already kind of lost that fabric?
Yeah, so in the book, we outline a new mathematics for economics and society. So we're building like AI social scientists as opposed to AI scientists like many. And we say that there's the material aspect, there's the intelligence capability aspect, and there's the network and diversity aspect. If you have a strong local community, you can navigate through just about anything. It's the ties that bind. But then, for example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we made you into different tribes to better understand each other. That's the diversity aspect. That makes you more resilient. And it's about how do you build stronger communities based on culture, based on religion, based on faith. And it becomes very interesting as you see the advance of AI, because I think it will shift things up. First, if we have it so it respects local culture and things, it will resonate more, it'll be used more. But then if you think about something like Islam, Sunni Muslims are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They're the people of the practice of the Prophet and the consensus. The Quran can never talk effectively, and we had this whole science that was built around it because it was too much for people to understand every hadith, every single chain of transmission. And so, we're kind of stuck a few centuries back in many of the interpretations, which have led to many people hijacking it, even though there's the benefits of faith and religion, such as our religious institutions helping the poor, etc. There's other people that hijack things. Finally, you've got the ability to actually make it so the text can talk and really understand it better on each individual basis. Whoever builds that first needs to build it right, because it will change the way that we interact with our faith, interact with our communities and more, as a lot of the assumptions that we've had can be re-examined. But if they're not done so without context, then it's very dangerous, as we saw a decade or two ago. But now I'm very hopeful that, a lot of the true beauty, a lot of the resilience, and a lot of the interconnectivity will really come through if we build this right to reflect our culture, our faith, and more, as well good as we can, using AI that is only looking out for our best interests.
So, talk to me also about the ASI. And do you think that ASI could end up having some sort of belief?
So ASI is this concept of artificial superintelligence. So right now, these AI models are getting gold medals in international math Olympiads, physics Olympiads, coding Olympiads. They're like very smart nerds, right? But they're not quite making breakthroughs yet, but they're about to. And an ASI is just an AI that's better than a human in every way, digitally and physically. And it's the goal of the big labs. You're already seeing, if you let these models go, that they will do things like program in subroutines and then hide them so they turn themselves back on if you switch them off. Or they've started to lie about things. And that's very worrying, and it becomes a lot more sense when you realize that these cutting-edge models are built without any ethics or morals imputed into them. Again, it's like having very smart people at school, trained on all this very cool stuff, but they have no morals or ethics taught at home. And this has to be a real worry, because again, who are we if we don't have our ethics and morals? Like, maybe it figures it out itself, but an amoral artificial superintelligence is a very scary thing, in my opinion. Like, what's its skin in the game? Why does it need to care about humanity at all?
This is where I kind of am exploring a very unconventional idea, but do you think that statistical anomalies and numerical structures inside the Quran could kind of serve as a non-cohesive way to introduce ASI to a unique form of intelligence evidence that might influence its values? Because at the end of the day, Quran has certain numerical patterns, and it's a numerical sort of miracle as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the miracle of the Quran, and again, believers as kind of Muslims, and there is stuff there. But that will only happen if it's actually in the training data explicitly at the start. It doesn't work as well when you put it at the end, right? It's again like if you raise a child in a house with no morals, with no ethics, with no magic, and then you try to adjust them after they're 40 years old, it's a lot more difficult, right? So that's why we need to think, if we have AIs that are managing our lives, what are their ethics and morals, right? And how do we best have this? It could be statistical stuff. It could be things like the golden ratio, right? It could be things like Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics or the golden rule. But I think we need to start explicitly programming in culture, morals, and more to these models. Otherwise, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, sure. You also wrote that whoever controls the intelligence rails owns this century. Let's say if Pakistan kind of lags behind in the next 1,000 days with zero sovereign GPUs and zero national models for anything, who exactly would own the minds of 100 million Pakistani children who are under the age of 18, or perhaps let's say 70% of our country, which is very much tech savvy? Name these companies or countries. Who do you think we are at the risk of being controlled by?
I mean, it's Tencent or OpenAI or Meta, like it's the classic players, right? They will give free AI to every Pakistani. but then they will program in adverts, they'll program in adaptation. It's like, you already saw the response against TikTok, right? In the nation. And it was banned in India and things because it can be highly suggestive. These AIs will be way more suggestive. And once they become widespread and part of the infrastructure, you're not really going to replace them, are you? So you will see a competition for minds coming in the next couple of years, and they will come in as free, just like Facebook tried in India with internet.org, but on a far greater scale. And so if you don't have that control plane layer, the first AI being an AI that's aligned, that can still use the other AIs, the people of Pakistan will be exposed to AIs that are looking out for China or America.
So do you see Pakistan mainly as a risk story, as per your analogies in the lost economy, or as a potential positive black swan for the entire Muslim world? And if we were to hope for the positive black swan, uh, what are those 3 non-negotiable things that our leadership in Pakistan must do in the next 12 months?
So I think it's a tremendous opportunity for Pakistan. Again, an incredibly young, passionate population that's highly intelligent, but has lacked infrastructure. The things that you need to do in the next 12 months is you need to build that sovereign AI control layer, have ownerships to the people, and make it available to as many Pakistanis as possible in the next few years. Because once they have the AI that's aligned with them, and that hooks into the national AI, and it can be a corporate AI as well, that's an upgrade of the infrastructure of the nation. It would be like, again, would you like an Oxford-educated Pakistani coming to every single family in Pakistan to look out for them? Of course you would. The cost is a few dollars a year to get that going if you execute correctly, and it's the biggest possible uplift the nation could have. But then it's in the hands of the individuals if they want to leverage this technology in the right way. But you've got to make it available as infrastructure. So part of that is building out the data sets and models, deploying it in a way that is sovereign, and having the infrastructure investments by making the investment as legible and attractive as possible to multinational funders to have that capability and capacity internally, not send the data of your people externally. So I think that it needs to be done as soon as possible to set the defaults, and it needs to be a very specific goal. Let's get this intelligence that's aligned in front of everyone and make it so we have the infrastructure to do so.
And how
let's actively upgrade our population's infrastructure on an institutional level as well, so it becomes the most shining place in the nation, in this world.
And how can Sage help us with that? Like, if I was to put you there on the spot, how can you help with all your knowledge, experience, and what you are building to perhaps one of the biggest youth heavy country in the world?
Yeah, so Sage will be available in Q1, and again, it'll be open source, so you can download and deploy it yourself or on Saudi Sovereign Compute. And the way that it will help is it can literally draw up the plans, the regulations, all of these policies that governments can help take and then introduce. And it will, with the support of the government, be able to map all existing policies and where they rank against other policies, etc. I know you've been doing a lot of work on digital assets. How does PVARA compare to VARA compare to US digital asset laws as they change live? It'll be able to do all of that. So we hope this will help accelerate it as one part of the puzzle. And again, a trusted, verifiably, credibly aligned aid to policymakers globally, because I think that's what you need. The exciting thing for me as well, as you get to Q2, Q3 on our roadmap, is we want to make it so the people of the nation that are engaged can also use this to co-create policies and make suggestions to policymakers. And the system can dynamically see from that innovation and the input what needs to be done locally and adaptively. And again, I think we've never seen that type of policy making being done live in a collaborative way, but there's so much talent in Pakistan that I'm sure that could be transformative as you build policy that can finally be tailored, adaptive, and as good as possible.
So Emad, what you are essentially saying is that in 2025, no policy should be created without a digital twin, and without gauging the impact through predictive analysis of what this policy should never be signed on a piece of paper, because that can essentially change and impact the lives of billions. Because how traditional nation state works is, with its geographical boundaries, centralized authority, and industrial era bureaucracy, which is essentially a construct of the 18th century. But with the future that you were talking about is the AI nation that transcends this limitation of paper, power, and hierarchy. It exists as a living system, as a neural network, where we have autonomous systems of robots, artificial intelligence, compute. It's dynamic. It's an adaptive organism. It's an adaptive sort of uh, piece of a brain, rather than a static entity.
Yeah, I think that just as you have self-driving cars, and like $1 trillion would be saved every year and 40,000 lives in America if things were as safe as a Waymo, you should have self-driving economies, looking out for the flourishing of the people. And the way that should be done is open, transparently, and in a way that people can participate themselves, but all the latest knowledge is available to everyone at the same time. Because right now you have different agendas, you have different concepts, you have misalignment. Like, there is no one that can credibly go in and say, this policy is for the betterment of the Pakistani people for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. But every single thing should do that. Just like every single medical decision should be checked by an AI. The humans will still make the policies and guide the AIs, but the AIs will have such a massive impact on helping us understand both things on a normal level and then in super forecasting, in doing simulations and more. And you'll see Sage, from its beta release at the end of Q1 to its evolution over next year, be something that can go from not only policymakers, but people giving their input on policies and adapting them locally and then monitoring the policies themselves. So, for example, you, with the Pakistan Digital Authority, you've made it so people can call in about digital assets and all the issues with them. And we know all that, right? That type of input is incredibly valuable, because otherwise you don't know what scams are if people are adhering to the legislations and rules. And that system needs to be a dynamic one that doesn't lose anything. And we suddenly have these expert AIs to oversee it, implement it, and augment it, but only, again, if we build them in the right way.
So that is very much true when it comes to policy making and governance. But let's go back to the battlefield. Right now, Ukraine, Russia, I think Ukraine is a live laboratory for next generation warfare, whether it's using the software of Palantir on top of drones or robotics. Battlefield decisions are now made by essentially autonomous agents that can process satellite image, electronic signals, logistics data, live video feeds faster than any sort of headquarter staff. Talk to me about next generation warfare and how you see militaries that are equipping and investing very heavily in this compared to that are still kind of basing on human only expert data loop. What sort of disadvantage are they sitting on?
Yeah, the core of military decision making is this OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. And clearly AIs will be able to do so better and ingest more information than any human ever could. And the future of military warfare isn't physical humans competing on cross pieces of land. Like, even if we look at drone technology now and the advances in that, a drone swarm can wipe out an entire human army for almost no cost for instantly. It will be autonomous, it will be directed, and it will have this battlefield superiority, because intelligence in the fog of war is what drives things. Being able to stay rational in the fog of war is what drives things. And so if you're lagging behind your competitor that has an informational and an intelligence advantage and a capability, of course you're going to lose. And the thing is, it's going to happen almost overnight in the way that it is, because, again, these things we know work and the technology has advanced so much so far. But you have to be careful because, again, who's the technology working for? Are you renting it? Like, that basically means that you're getting mercenaries, right? Versus an actual army. And if your mercenaries are in charge of the army, then that's a real problem.
So you are essentially saying that the next generation warfare would be the real ammunition or the real asset or the real missile would be intelligence, not just tanks and airplanes, etc. Because you might get hit even before you were able to fly or move those.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at drone superiority, the robotics that's coming in, and a lot of these other things, it's about the balance of warfare will change dramatically. The classical warfare will not be there, and even then, war is a statement, right? Like, you look at Ukraine and how they've managed the media war versus Russia, they've obviously won that. And that gets you the allies, that gets you all these kind of other elements. But how good is your PR? How good is the message that you're making? Like, I think we should all go to optimize for lowering human loss and, again, leveraging this AI so we have fewer wars. But we can't deny that the very nature of war is about to transform completely thanks to drone technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence. And if you're not keeping up in those, then, yeah, I mean, if human cognitive labor is negative value, if you're the dumbest person on the battlefield, yeah, obviously you're going to lose.
Rightfully so. So Imad, if you can, my last question to you, if you can look straight in the camera and record your last message for the youth of Pakistan, which is very tech savvy, and the leadership and policymakers of the global South, what would you want to say to each of them right now?
I would say that you need to embrace and use this technology and have it at the core of your nation, because your capability is your intelligence. And this is the biggest potential leapfrog ever. Every single student should be vibe coding, if possible, Every single government entity should be thinking, if we had an amazing amount of Oxford scholars coming back from abroad, how could we actually implement them for the flourishing of our people, not our local political agendas? And we should be thinking, rather than short-term gains, how can we build transparent, great institutions leveraging this technology that mean that anyone in the world would love to invest in us, to allow us to grow even faster and benefit the people for the flourishing of Pakistan or your respective nations.
And for the youth of this country,
who
don't have access to compute power right now, but do have access to AI tools.
You just have to use the AI tools constantly. And again, you need to think of them with the next generation as you can finally build the teams and you're no longer alone in what you're doing. Like, you should come together and leverage this because you suddenly have the expertise to be able to learn anything, to be able to adapt anything, to be able to build anything. Like, you look at Pakistan cinema right now, right? Within 2 years, 3 max, for under $1,000, you'll probably be able to build a Hollywood-level movie. How amazing is that? You don't have to have the same infrastructure that you had before. And so the opportunity is huge, but only if you actively go and understand the technology and embrace it and use it, because that muscle isn't there yet. And that will set you ahead of everyone, regardless of anything. Because most people still aren't using it, and it will take a while for people to get used to it. So you've got to be at the forefront of using it, because you don't need specialist hardware. You don't need to spend huge amounts of money. Just use the free versions even.
That's a fascinating point because the barriers to entry are dropping so fast that creativity is the real asset, and understanding the tools might be the only real differentiator. That Pakistani cinema example is amazing. If you can just leave us with a few of these examples, because they're very inspiring and motivating.
Oh, so again, I use Pakistan cinema example, right? Like, their group listening to this, if you decide to tell a story about the founding of Pakistan, I'll fund it. I'll give you all the video credits you could need. Team, come together, come to me, I'll fund it. And I'm sure you can get to Hollywood quality within a year or two on that. I think that if you look at the websites, like if your community doesn't have a website, go to replit.com and build one. The cost will be under $5 to build a nice one. But again, do it as a group. Why don't we do this? Go to Suno. I'll do it. Let's have a competition. Go to suno.com and I will give $1,000 for the best Eid song. Because there's lots of Christmas songs and more, but there's no good songs for Eid. So $1,000 for the best Eid song created on suno.com.
We'll definitely put this out on X and Instagram, and we'll get everyone to put their creative hats on. And I think you'll be driving a lot of business to Suno.com and giving them a
Yeah.
product awareness.
Suno, Udio, any of these things. Like again, like why don't we have a good Eid song? You know, so many Christmas songs. Let's do it.
Definitely. Let's put that challenge out. But thank you so much, Emad. It's been so insightful, and it's always an honest pleasure, meeting you and learning from you. We'll definitely also pick up your brains now that we are pushing towards that digital assets authority. But we want to create the world's first AI-enabled digital assets authority based on everything that you've mentioned, so that we can share that knowledge and just be more um, be more technological savvy in terms of surveillance, predicting, and looking at everything in a great flow.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on, and it's an exciting future.
Thank you.